All right. Well, welcome back to Real Talk, everyone. Yay! Woo!
We're here.
Yeah! Insert clap track there. Yeah!
Insert
Woo!
in sync song.
Bye bye
Yo
bye.
te voy a amar.
Uh, um, welcome back, everyone. Woohoo! We're here. We're recording. We're doing things. Look, I
John,
know.
do you remember what your intro was? I don't remember what the intro was. There was an intro
Oh
you said
god,
that was like a slapper,
it
and I
went
forgot.
so hard. Welcome back to Real Talk, everyone. Where we talk about real things that happened and real things that are happening. It was something like that, right?
Sure. I don't remember. So say whatever you want.
Absolute pleasure to have you all here with us. I hope you enjoyed last episode. I don't remember what we talked about, but I'm sure it was banging. I hope that you enjoyed this one too. Now, I did speak about what we're going to talk about this week. I got very excited at the end of last podcast. Jack, do you remember what we're going to talk about this week?
Dunkirk.
Yes. And did you do your homework?
Watched a couple of YouTube shorts.
Did you actually?
No.
I was
But
gonna
I can
say,
if you want. Do you want me to watch some right now?
No, well,
And I'll just get the history of Dunkirk.
Do not get YouTube short history of Dunkirk, because then the listener won't want to listen for an hour to us. They'll just watch YouTube short history of Dunkirk.
Oh shit, that's true.
Yeah. We need them to talk to us.
Okay, maybe we'll just turn it into YouTube shorts afterwards.
Yeah. Bang, all right. Beautiful. So what we'll do is we'll cut this hour down to 30 seconds, and then we'll slap it on YouTube shorts, and it'll bang.
Yep.
All right. Well, anyway, it was nice talking to you guys. So this week...
Quick.
If you don't know who Real Talk are, really strange. You probably should know by now. What are we, episode like 69 or something?
My name's 17?
My name is John. I am a what I would consider an armchair historian, but I do study history like in further education. So I would consider myself a very amateur historian. And next to me here is Jack, who is a very amateur comedian. And we both... and we have this little podcast because I like to explain and teach history to people, and Jack likes to listen to that and sometimes make the odd joke.
That's what I do.
There were plenty of times in our friendship where I found myself talking about the history or a thing that happened, and Jack going, "Man, that's crazy." And we'd talk for like 2 hours, and then we'd be like, "Man, we should do a podcast on this." And eventually we actually did, and here we are.
And then I said, "Yo, pass me that. Yo, we should make a podcast."
Yeah, true.
Last night was a movie.
We were 420 blazed, and
John, you know that I looked up myself. Like I asked ChatGPT, like who I was.
You
I
can
said,
do
"Who is?"
that?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what it said. I asked ChatGPT who I am, and they responded and they said, "Ayo Jack is an online content creator known for his work as a YouTuber, podcast host, and self-described comedian.
Whoa!
He produces a variety of content, including gaming videos, live streams, and podcasts. His YouTube channel features gameplay from titles like Ghosts of Tsushima and Wrestling Empire, as well as reaction videos and other entertainment content. On Twitch, he engages with his audience through live streams, sharing his gaming experiences in real time. Additionally, Ayo Jack maintains a presence on Instagram and TikTok, where he shares updates and interacts with his followers." Isn't that crazy?
So weird.
What I said afterwards was like, it seems like I just got into like a controversy, and a blog post has to like mention who I am before they talk about like, and then he killed his wife or something like that.
That's so
I mean, that's a little bit more than just a controversy.
That's so
I got myself into a little bit of drama. You know, I killed my wife.
I got myself into a bit of drama. I committed murder. Well, talking about committing murder, today I wanted to talk about Dunkirk, which is a very real situation. That
More like Funkirk.
If anyone, you know what, maybe for a select group of people who who, I don't know, maybe watched the movie when it came out, or have like watched an old video or something, or know a little bit about World War II, Dunkirk's probably one of the kind of top 5 kind of most influential moments that kind of happened, I would say, in World War II. Pretty much, to like boil it down, it's when the Allied army at the start of World War II, or early on, I should say, was trapped in northern France, and through a series of very strange circumstantial events and the kind of birth of or like the very much like a showing of at what at the time was like a very British spirit, and kind of Allied uniformed spirit. The British were able to get off the mainland and return home for the most part. Thousands did die. I'm just pre-warning. It's not a wonderful story, but it is
so not so fun, Kirk.
No, but it is. I wouldn't say out of all of the Funkirks, it's up there. But it is still a story that's worth talking about because it's a moment that I feel highlights really the kind of mentality that a lot of the Allies, especially those in like the Commonwealth, felt. It highlighted well the spirit of the Commonwealth and the resilience of the people at this time. Jack, do you know at all what Dunkirk is?
I actually don't, which is worrying me that you said that it was like a very big important thing. Because now I feel like maybe after 17 episodes I still don't know enough about history.
Really?
I've heard of Dunkirk. And that's about as far as it goes. I think it might have been the last name of an NBA player. I could be wrong, but... Oh no, that's Tim Duncan. So never mind, I've never heard of Dunkirk in my life. So I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to learn something.
All right. Well, I'm hoping that much of the audience is sort of the same, because if you're going to listen to this and you already know it all, not great. Look, we need to do a bit of backstory. Obviously, it takes place during World War II. Right? Now, there were a couple of big players in World War II. Jack, lay 'em on me. Who are the big players in World War II?
Adolf Hitler.
Are we more than 5 minutes in? We are. Yes, that was one of them.
Oh, okay. I thought you were laughing because that was wrong.
No. That's like, very much right. Very much right.
Wasn't he in both of them?
He technically he was only a soldier in one. He was very much unnamed in the First War.
Oh, so did he even get like end credits?
No. He was like... He was
like an uncredited
He was
extra?
a literal grunt in World War One.
Damn. What do you reckon? If he got shot, his head would have like blew up with confetti?
He didn't get shot, but he did get gassed.
That's
gassed.
Very ironic.
Well, it is a bit. It is a bit ironic that he got gassed.
Now I have an idea. Anyway,
he got gassed with mustard gas, and if you look up pictures of young Adolf Hitler or when he was a young man, he had a big mustache because in World War One everyone had a massive mustache, and when he tried to put his gas mask on, it couldn't fit over the mustache.
That's awful.
That's why people say that he has the mustache that he does, because it meant that he was able to keep facial hair while putting a gas mask over it.
The mustache that he did.
Oh yeah, sorry, he fucking died because he blew his own brains out like a little fucking baby pussy head. Fuck that guy.
Oh god, I really hope we're 5 minutes in.
It's alright, we're more than 10 minutes in, we're good. All my homies hate Hitler.
Welcome to Real Talk. Adolf Hitler shot himself in the head like a pussy-ass bitch.
Fuck that guy. All my homies hate that guy.
Okay, so Adolf Hitler, To be honest, I'm kind of embarrassed to even like say someone else because I really don't know, and I'm worried that if I say someone else that's not
Just
correct, I'm going to
spitball,
look
man.
like
That's the beauty. That's the
an
beauty of
idiot.
learning. There's no wrong answer. There's just answers that need to be steered the right way.
I'm like the Padawan of historians.
Yeah,
Is
I
that?
like that. I like that. Do you have a little
I'm in
rat tail and
training.
stuff as well?
I'll grow one
And then you
out.
go, I killed them. I killed them.
Slaughtered them
I
like
slaughtered
animals.
them like animals.
Yeah, the younglings. Uh, yeah, I actually like. I'm blanking. I actually don't.
There's another guy who had a mustache.
Another
Pretty
guy
cool
who had
one. Pretty big
a,
one.
hang on. Hey,
Stop googling. I
okay,
can hear your
Google.
keyboard going. I can hear your
Oh,
keyboard
sorry.
going. You're
Okay,
cheating,
Google
you're cheating,
mustache
you're
man in
cheating.
World War Two.
You're cheating. You're cheating.
I don't know, John.
He's cheating. All right.
John,
Well,
I don't know. I'm closing my InSync music group tab.
all right. Countdown done. The
So you're going to say one right now, and I'm going to go. Of course.
there was Stalin.
Yeah, I wanted to say Stalin. I got scared though. I got
There was
stage fright.
Winston Churchill.
I was going to say Winston Churchill as well.
There was
God
also
damn it.
the Teddy Roosevelt.
Couldn't
so
he wrestle really good?
Roosevelt.
was that? I'm pretty sure because I know Abraham Lincoln apparently
Am
Lincoln
I
could
an
wrestle,
idiot?
but it's like Roosevelt, right?
Yeah.
Teddy
yeah,
Roosevelt.
yeah. No. You're thinking no, sorry. Franklin Roosevelt was the
Franklin?
guy. Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt or Theodore Roosevelt was the man who wrestled. Also, Theodore Roosevelt, he got shot during a speech and
Yeah, didn't
finished
he
his
live?
speech.
Yeah.
He finished his speech and then got
God.
down. What a
Dude,
G.
We are
Anyway,
such like a shit generation of humans.
anyway,
Dude, I get like a little bit sick, and I'm like, I can't work for 2 weeks.
Franklin Roosevelt was the American president. Sorry,
Ah.
not Teddy.
Wait, so what number president was he? 'Cause wasn't Teddy...
39th.
Wait, so Teddy Roosevelt was
20 something.
26? Oh, so when was that? The fuck? Anyway.
Teddy was in like the 1800s.
Oh,
Yeah,
what an
and
old
then,
man.
And then Franklin died at the end of World War II because he had something. He was in a wheelchair, but he wasn't initially in the wheelchair. He died of something.
Did he die in the wheelchair?
He is also the longest serving president in history. Did you know that?
How long?
Because I don't know, but I know that he served more than 2 terms.
Did he like outlive the life expectancy because it was like fucking 32 or something back then?
No. He was a very sick man. But he because the country was in a state of war, they couldn't hold an election, and so he stayed longer than you're meant to. But
Isn't
people
that
were
similar
like
to
okay
what
with
is
that.
happening right now in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, yeah, exactly. We talked about that 2 weeks ago.
Or 3 weeks ago, I don't even remember.
No.
It was
2
a
weeks
while
ago. 2 weeks ago, we're on schedule.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Anyway.
Roosevelt,
So all these
Stalin,
major players existed.
Hitler, Winston Churchill.
Let's throw it back. Start of World War II. We've gone over this plenty of times now on this podcast. World War II breaks out. Germany invades Poland after being appeased by the Allies for the past 5 years because they're like, no, please, some more cummies, Hitler, please.
Please,
Please keep eating European countries without us doing anything. So anyway, they kept doing that, and eventually Germany invaded a country a bit too big that you can't just rub it out on a map, and the Allies were like, oh, darn, okay, I guess we have to do something. So the Allies declared war on Germany and didn't actually invade Germany. They fought over what was called the Maginot Line, which was a line of forts directly on the border between Germany and France in an area called Alsace-Lorraine. Now this
I've heard of Alsace-Lorraine.
Yeah, so this line of forts was built after World War One because the French were like, never again will Germany be able to break through our country, right? So it was like a defensive fort line. It was really thick. It was very scary. There was like hundreds and hundreds of bunkers, loads of mines, barbed wire, that kind of thing, right? No one was ever going to get through. And the Germans were like, we're not going through that. Fuck that. We're all going to die. So what they do is they assign like it was something stupid, like 10,000 men to that border, which is tiny in this time period, right? Nowadays, that's like people's whole military. But back then, that was such a small amount of men, right? And so they had a small amount of soldiers on this border, and every now and again they'd like shoot bullets at the French, and the French would be like, "Oh my god, they're coming!" But the French never like attacked into Germany. The Germans were just like, "Ha ha," and then run away. There was like ding dong ditch in the Maginot Line, right? So anyway, the Germans were ding dong ditch in the Maginot Line, and at this time, Germany had finished in fucking Poland. We're like, that was fucking easy. Wiped the floor with them. Let's sit here and continue to shoot bullets every now and then at the Allies,
like because
we don't want to invade France during the winter. We don't want to do anything during the winter. We need to build up a few more men, because at this point the French and British army that were both stationed in France actually outnumbered the German army 3-1. But the Germans were like, "Nah, we're not going to do that." They were like, "Nah, we're not going to do that." And so the French, sat behind their little fort line like, "Oui, you will never attack us." And then they said, wait, hang on, do your best French accent, Jack. Hang on. Okay, where are you from in France? Are you 2 years old? Can you not talk yet? Was that a French baby?
I'm learning.
Oui, baby, you are.
Yeah, I don't know any.
Anyway, the French are sat behind their little fort line, like, oui, you won't attack us, baguette or something. And then the Germans were like, "You're right, we're not going to do that. We're going to invade Poland, finish up with Poland, job done, split that with Stalin."
Poland.
Yeah, finish all over Poland's face, right? So they're done. They've finished all over Poland. And then they're like, "Man, you know what else? We should invade Denmark." So they invade Denmark. And then they're like, there's this plan at the moment that the Allies are doing. Now, we're in early 1940 at this point. So the
You sound Germans like the French baby.
Sorry, the Germans were like, "Okay, we've heard these plans from the Allies. They're going to put troops in Norway because Norway's shipping a shit ton of steel to us, and we need that steel, right? Norway, big producers of steel." And the Germans were like, "Man, we need that steel. How are we going to build our camps or whatever they use that steel on? So we need to invade Norway. We need to stop the Allies doing that." So they sail a couple of ships up to the Norwegian border. And while they're doing this, they drop some troops off in Oslo, and they start attacking in Norway. And the Allies are like, "Hold up, guys. They can't just invade Norway." So they're fighting in Norway. And then while the French have got their back to the Maginot Line, because they're looking at the Norway fight, because you can see it, right, obviously, 3 countries away, they're looking over there, they're like, yes, there's something going on over there. The Germans come over and they give them a wedgie. And that really distracts the French, and so they look back across the Maginot Line. And while they're doing this, the Germans then invade the Netherlands and Belgium and just go around the Maginot Line. It was literally a maneuver called Around the Maginot. Very subtle, I know.
The little ring around the rosy.
Do the old whoop whoop. Oh, never mind. It looks like your fucking stupid border is gone. So the Dutch are like desperately trying to fight. They get their ass handed to them. Really unfortunate. Now this invasion happened on the 10th of May. So the 10th of May, 3 German panzer corps rolled their way through the Ardennes, which is a forest that's near, that kind of connects Belgium, a country called Luxembourg, Germany, and France. It's like a small forested area. And the French didn't garrison it a lot because they're like, well, how the fuck are they going to get tanks through a forest? Well, the Germans were like, we're going to drive our tanks through this forest, and did it. And then when they rolled through, it took them 11 days to completely encircle the Allied army. That is 350,000 men in a tiny pocket. We're talking a pocket smaller than like a suburb in Melbourne at this point, right? Really bad. Let me just make sure. Yeah, 390,000 British soldiers were encircled. That is, at this point, the entire British army is encircled by the German army in 11 days. The Panzer
And where were
Corps.
they?
So I have sent a picture to Jack, which you'll be able to see in the YouTube version of this. You'll be able to see it physically. However, if you're following along at home, the little picture that I've sent Jack, you can just Google Dunkirk map, and it should show you. Do you see the region of Dunkirk there, Jack?
Yep.
Yeah, do you see pretty much where... Oh, hang on. Let me get you a nice, easier image. Here you go.
I was going to say, I do also have just Google Maps, posted up on the second monitor.
That does work. I just want to see if I can get you a good little image. All of these images are fucking awful. No, I was in the swing of it. Now I've had to stop to look up pictures.
Oh no.
I know. I'm sorry. So the Germans have stormed their way through the Ardennes, through this forest, which goes through Belgium, and which goes through Belgium and the region of Luxembourg, which is I don't know, it's kind of weird to outline what Luxembourg is, but it's like the Vatican. It's like the Vatican in that it's like a city that they kind of that was like a country. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to find a good picture for you, but I'm really struggling. A lot of these images are a lot of battle lines, and they're very confusing to look at unless you really, really zoom in on there. This one's all right, I think. Oh, not really. Sorry, listeners. I apologize.
Yeah, I can see Luxembourg and Belgium and stuff like that.
Yeah, so anyway, they moved their way through Lower Belgium, Upper Luxembourg, and have surrounded the British in the region of Dunkirk at this point. It took them 11 days. Now, the Germans went through that forest, completely encircled the north of France. And the German tanks just kept going. They were under command of a general called Guderian, who was a avid user of methamphetamines in his army. It took the less than, I want to say, a month, maybe less than a month, to completely capitulate France, which means France surrendered. It took them 11 days. The Germans slept for a day of it or some shit, in total.
That's crazy.
They just kept going because they were on drugs, and that's how the Blitzkrieg worked. The German...
I understand how truckers get their deliveries and stuff. They'll just do meth.
The German military doctrine relied on Blitzkrieg or quick war or something, quick victory, where they would obviously attack an enemy country or an army with such speed that it wouldn't allow the enemy army to recover. Now, they did this to France by going through the Ardennes. They capitulated the Dutch and the Belgians extremely quickly, in under 10 days, and surrounded the British Expeditionary Force, or the BEF, which were forces that were sent to Europe to hold France, to help France, right? Now, the British had sent about 400,000 soldiers at this point. That is a lot of fucking people, right? That 400,000 men, that is a lot of people. And they'd sent these people to France to hold France. They hadn't held France, and France had all but lost at this point. Now, Guderian had practically cut a straight line from the Ardennes, from Luxembourg and Belgium, had gone straight towards Paris, right? Leaving small elements of the German army behind to attempt to encircle the northern BEF forces, which they did in Dunkirk. Now, they encircled them, killing 70,000 British soldiers. I'm not sure how many French ones. All vehicles, equipment, tanks, weaponry, sometimes backpacks, clothing had to be left behind because the Germans were moving so fast they had no chance to actually move this equipment back. They were like blitzed. Unimaginable speed these armies were moving at the time, like so fast that Churchill had sent a letter or like a telegram to France, because France had been like, the Germans had broken through Ardennes, right? Churchill woke up the next morning, called the Prime Minister or the President of France and had said, don't give up. And the French were like, we've already surrendered.
That's crazy.
Like, that's how fast it happened. Like, it was the speed at which this happened. Now, this had all followed what was called the Phony War, where, like, they were shooting at each other across the Ardennes, so, across the Maginot Line, so not a lot was really happening there. And then out of nowhere, the Germans came in, they blitzed it. So they have now trapped, right? They have now trapped 400,000 people in the area of Dunkirk. Well, realistically, they'd actually trapped 1 million. But it was about 400,000 British soldiers. Well, actually, it would be less at this point, wouldn't it? Because they killed 70,000. So about 300,000 at this point. British soldiers were stuck in Dunkirk, along with like roughly 600 to 700,000 French. A lot. Like, the entire Allied army was encircled. There was nothing left in France. The Germans swept through the whole country in a matter of hours. Past that point, there was nothing they could do. So anyway, we have about 1 million men trapped in an extremely small pocket in the northern part of France. In a port town that doesn't have a deep water port, which means that it's made for fishing boats, yachts. So you can't fit like a warship in there, right? Which is what you would normally evacuate people through. There was no long corridor, dock, or there was nothing to board men on. So they're sat on a beach. You've got 1 million men on a beach and in a small coastal town. Think like, have you ever been to like, Phillip Island? Mm-hmm. So think of like a space the size of Phillip Island with 1 million people on it, right?
Jesus Christ.
And the Germans bombing it, shelling it, and constantly squeezing with their infantry and armored vehicles over the course of like 9 days, right? That's all it was, pretty much. But it wasn't an island, because that would have been really useful. It was a beach that had a small town connected to it. That's all it was, right? Very dire. At this point, the Allies, all the British command are like, we need to surrender. Otherwise, we're about to lose an entire generation of people. Like, this is it. If we don't surrender now, we're fucked, right? The Nazi high command told the forces that were squeezing them in to stop. This was on the 23rd of May. So from the 21st of May, they were trapped. For 2 days, they were being squeezed by infantry. And then on the 23rd of May, so 2 days later, after they were trapped in Dunkirk, the Germans said, stop. You have to stop pushing. Now, at the time, this was really confusing. Nobody really knew why. And it was because Guderian and his meth addict tank brigade had gone... Well, they were called the Ghost Division because they were so far ahead that they were just missing, but they were still taking land. So, like, they were like ghosts, right? Like you knew they, like, were there, and they were sort of, like, doing stuff, but you didn't know where they were, what they were doing. There was no communication, but they, like, every now and again you get a telegram, oh, by the way, we're in Paris. They're like, huh? We barely crossed the fucking River Rhine. We're like a country.
Turn around.
Yeah.
By the way, look down, and your shoelaces are fucking tied together.
We're a country away. And Guderian's like, well, we've just landed in, fucking Bordeaux. We're drinking some wine, and it's like, whoa, slow down. So
we're here in Dunkirk at the Toyota dealership.
So they ordered the German army to stop squeezing Dunkirk because they're like, we need to divert forces away because we need to actually take this country properly, because there were British forces that were dug in a small area to the left of Dunkirk called Calais, and they hadn't squeezed that area, then surrounded it enough, and the German high command was really worried that the British forces there would counterattack and cut off the supply lines to Guderian's panzers, which is really bad because then you'd lose the meth addicts and also half your army. So the Germans are like, all right, hold up, swing around, we need to like actually take this country before we squeeze these people more. So that gave the Allies 3 days. 3 days. The Allies during this time had the ability to do because the German army stopped squeezing them, they could dig in. They began building things like so very clever. What they did, there was a lot of engineers, right? The British sent a lot of engineers in their expeditionary force, and what they did is they would line all their shitty, busted up trucks in a row, and then push them. Like when the sea went out, they lined up all their trucks all the way as far as they could up to the ocean when it was all the way out, and then put wood along the top so that when the water came in, boats could come up to like the wood, and the troops could march along the wood to then get in the boats. So they were like building docks, right? They were like panically trying to build docks. Now, on the first day of this halt, I should mention, when the Germans halted their land army, Goering, Hermann Goering? That is not his name, is it?
What a cringe name.
Is that his name? I think it's...
That guy got a lot of wedgies.
Hermann Goering, if you want to say his name properly, but it's Goering, because I'm not going to give that man the light of day. Hermann German Goering, he was a fighter ace in World War One, and also the head of the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, during World War Two. Now, the Luftwaffe were given the order to bomb the shit out of the Allies while the German army wasn't pushing, because Goering was like, don't worry guys, I can just bomb them. You don't have to lose a single man, a single tank, I'll just bomb them into submission, and then you never have to lose anything. Which in all fairness might have worked if between the 23rd and the 31st it wasn't cloudy for a week. The cloud cover was so heavy over Dunkirk that of the, 23rd to the 31st, how many days is that, Jack? It's 8. So of the 8 days, 6 of them were cloudy. Cloudy to the point where you couldn't like have dive bombers, because that was like the Germans' main plane at the time. It was called a Stuka, and it would dive and it had this little horn on it. It was very scary. And so when it dove, it was like, whee! And it was like, it was a scream to literally intimidate people. Very gross. Anyway, it couldn't dive because it can't see where it's going. It's kind of like, it can't like, well, once it gets below the clouds, it doesn't have time to pull up. It's not a jet. It doesn't have like that upward propulsion, right? So they can't do anything for 6 of those 8 days. Now, of the 2 days they could do something, it was actually like a fucking bloodbath. They ended up sinking 140 ships of the 900 sent in the 2 days they could actually bomb, which is like, if you imagine they could have flown for those full 8 days, all of those ships and all of those men would have died. So Goering, in all fairness, was right, but couldn't control the weather because he's not God. He's just a fat German, so he couldn't do anything.
Okay. No need to bring his appearance into it.
He was a very fat meth addict who was also a Nazi, and I have no love for this man. He also pled not guilty to war crimes, so fuck that guy. So on the first day, this was before they had done like this great thing, which I'll tell you in a minute. On the first day, this was them evacuating on a single like built kind of dock thing where they could get people on like little boats and then row them out to a destroyer. They only evacuated 8,000 men. Now, just remember, there is 400,000 men. Well, 1 million if we count the French, but 400,000 British soldiers on this beach, and they were able to evacuate 8,000 in a day. Right? They've got 8 days in our timeline right now. Very bad. There was a city called Lille, which is like a small pocket in France. They held out for like the full 8 days. So they were like a French force that didn't surrender, and they held and they pulled a lot of air cover and armored divisions to them. These 40,000 French soldiers died, all of them. But they held up seven German divisions, 3 armored divisions, and 2/3 of the Luftwaffe for those 8 days. So without the sacrifice of those French soldiers, every one of those British people would be dead. And I think that's really important to highlight, because the French do get a bit of a ripping when it comes to World War II. The old wave, well, I don't like French people in general, but no, I'm joking. It's a joke. It's a British thing. They do the same to us. But in World War II, they get a lot of ripping for being like the people who surrendered and stuff. But yes, the French government were cowardly. They were cowardly and they gave up. French individuals, they didn't. They fought very hard, and without the sacrifice of these 40,000 men, hundreds of thousands would have died. And I think that's really important to highlight. Now, the Allies, the British specifically, obviously they're like, we only evacuated 8,000 men. We can't ferry 400,000 people in 8 days in small boats that can carry 16 men at a time to one destroyer over, like, we can't do that with one way off this beach. So what did they do? That's right, Jack. You guessed correctly. What they did is they went to all the coastal towns in southeastern England. So we're talking like Dover, that kind of region.
Deal. I don't know. I'm just looking at Google Maps.
They went to Dover.
Walking.
And they asked any civilian who had a seaworthy boat, that's like a fishing trawler, a yacht, just a sailing ship, would you be willing to either relinquish your ship or go yourself to France, collect soldiers, and bring them home? Now, obviously, realistically, do I want to fly in? Do I want to sail a boat, a slow-moving fishing boat, into a hail of gunfire, artillery, bombing strikes, submarines?
Maybe not.
Absolutely fucking not. However, 800 vessels, that's almost the entire capacity of the Dover docks, which was incredible, volunteered to go to France and collect these men. Now, without these 800 ships, every man on that beach would have died. 800 ships collected, in the end, 338,226 soldiers.
That's pretty sick.
That is an incredible feat of a nation coming together to save its people. These boys, these soldiers, these young men, because that's what they were volunteers. They were young men who were sent to a different country across the ocean to save it, or help it, I should say. Save it's the wrong way to put it, but help it. Were encircled and thought they were going to die and didn't know what to do. The Air Force was struggling because the British Air Force at this point was extremely small. The Navy was getting its ass kicked by dive bombers. However, 800 brave fishing vessels and recreational yachts, etc., pleasure craft, lifeboats, sailed over the Channel, which is known very well for being one of the worst areas to sail in the world for small vessels, to a war zone where they were actively bombed and killed. 170 of those 800 vessels were sunk. These were civilian men and women and children who sailed their ships over. They were sunk, but they were able to save 338,000 people, and they weren't just British soldiers. They brought back 170,000 French people as well. They brought back the British first. It was their priority, but they came back for the French. Many French died in the town of Dunkirk, attempting to hold it to allow this evacuation. It is a extremely well documented highlight of how the spirit of a nation that feels it needs to save itself and protect itself will do that. Especially during this time, a lot of these people that were sailing these boats are either old men who fought in World War One, whose sons, brothers, etc. are in this army that are being sieged, or their wives and working women that own these boats that then sailed over. Many of these ships were taken by the British Marine group and were sailed over by Marines. However, a very large quantity were volunteered men, women, and their crews, because some of them required crews, who sailed over and attempted to save these people, because these small ships can go up to a beach, they can go close to the sand, whereas a destroyer obviously can't, right? 70,000 British soldiers died defending Dunkirk. Winston Churchill called the entire event a colossal military disaster, saying that the whole route and core and brain of the British army had been stranded in Dunkirk, and they seemed about to die. He hailed their rescue as a miracle of deliverance. And Churchill also reminded the country that we'd be very careful not to assign this deliverance and the attributes of victory, but instead, wars are not won by evacuations. So he did say that it's a wonderful thing that it happened, but not to feel like this is a win. This is a loss. But it's it's still something to celebrate.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it's such a... would you want to know, I took my boat over and saved a whole bunch of, soldiers, and then for Winston Churchill to be like, I mean, you guys kind of fucked up. Well, you guys are, not good.
Well, it's very well known that a lot of the British soldiers who were there believed when they come home they'd be seen as failures, as people who lost, as someone who let down their country. But generally, 90% of it are people welcoming them home. They're glad to see them alive. They're glad to see them home. And I think it was very interesting as a nation that the British didn't look at it and go, this is a failure. Their Prime Minister did, and much of the military high command did, because yes, it was technically a military failure, right? But the people saw it as a victory, because
I guess when you see, when you're seeing people go into war, you're like, the only thing, I don't care what happens as long as the people are coming back, kind of thing. And as long as I'm not dying, as long as what they're doing is helping us, and I want to see them come back.
Yeah. It's I think it's a wonderful highlight of a nation coming together to commit how they can to the war effort, right? Because a lot of these older men, they either couldn't, they couldn't serve anymore, or they didn't have to, etc., right? But they still were willing to without, they were required to, but it was, they went there and they committed themselves without, they were unarmed, untrained for a couple of decades. They were old. A lot of these ships were not ready for combat. In fact, none of them were. And yet they sailed into it like a... Have you ever seen a movie that portrays D-Day? Have you ever watched Saving Private Ryan or anything?
I haven't, but yeah, no? I do know what you're talking about. It's
literally it was, millions of men charging up a beach into the quickest firing machine guns in history, right? It was insanity when you think about it. These ships were doing practically the equivalent of that. They were unarmed, slow moving wooden boats sailing into like a hail of gunfire, artillery, planes, and like submarines also. Devastating. Holy shit, I don't care how big your boat is. If a big fuck off piece of metal with an explosive strapped to it bumps into the side of you and blows up, your boat's going down, you know? In total, 243 of these ships were sunk. Civilian ships. Which is hard. That's hard. That's a lot. That's the you know, and they're all heroes.
Yeah.
You know, they're all heroes. Yeah, on the first day, 7,000 were evacuated, as I said before. But on the third day, on the 30th of May, when the shipping or when the small ships were beginning to arrive, 50,000. The next day, 67,000. Day after that, 64,000. And then it slowed down to 26, 26, 26 each day. So what my realistic point of talking about this is that the Second World War is highlighted a lot as this like fight against like Nazism, and you know the French surrendered and like the Russians fought for their life, and they did. The Russians fought for their fucking life. The French did surrender. The British were pushed out of Europe. But it's important to highlight that also, like, the individual civilian had a lot to do with the existence of a country. And, like, I feel like this reflects a lot in current day in how we see in, like, for instance, in the Ukraine, we see a lot of civilian members of society either taking up arms or supplying or providing soldiers, friendly soldiers, homes to sleep in with a roof over their head, food, water, even locations of enemy forces, etc., right? It takes a nation that is on the brink of its non-existence to really bring out this kind of survival aspect that humanity still has. I think it highlights very much like almost a primal sense of ourselves where like this is home and I will do what I need to defend home. And even if you like, that doesn't mean you have to pick up a gun. It could mean you ferry your ship across an ocean to help people. You know, even if you bring back 10 men, that's 10 more men that didn't have to die on a beach in a foreign country. You know, that's if you provide a roof for a Ukrainian soldier, that's a Ukrainian soldier that's not going to die to a drone that night. You know, it's stuff like that. Like we see this fighting spirit existent in countries that are literally fighting for their lives, and I think it's unfortunate that it's historical moments like Dunkirk and the Battle of Lille, where those 40,000 men sacrificed themselves to delay an overwhelming force from destroying their allies, because they weren't stopping them from destroying French soldiers, because and it sounds awful, but a French soldier could have taken their uniform off, taken a fucking bunch of clothing out of the nearest house in Dunkirk and just walked off. You know, but they didn't. They stayed, they fought until the last day, until all the British soldiers could get off that beach, and then they allowed themselves to evacuate or attempt to blend into civilian life to not get killed. Some didn't do that. Some just kept fighting until they died. And we see that in real life. I mean, we see it in Palestine too. You know, the civilian, the individual. It's so much so now with like things like reporting it. Film it, put it online, show it. That's doing your part, you know? And I think that comes down to a global sense. If you at all feel influenced by something that's going on in the world, whether it's to you, to something that you might care about, that you want to care about, document it, talk about it. Fuck, that's what we do. Well, that's what I do on here. You know, I just waffle how I feel about current political situations, because it's important that even if one person listens to this and doesn't quite know that, you know, doesn't quite know what's going on or didn't know about this situation, that they now know. And I think that's an important thing to highlight, you know?
I will say it kind of sucks that it takes literally like borderline, I guess, like your country disappearing to just be like, yeah, I'm going to help people right now. Like, I think that's something that is annoying to see, where it's like people don't really help each other. People don't really care about each other that much. And then, like, unless we have 400,000 people on the edge of a beach that are being killed, and you're like, yeah, okay, now I'll help. I'll come help these people. You get me? Where it's like, I'm not going to, or actually, most people are not that helpful in general.
Yeah.
And it just like, with you mentioning stuff like this, where it's like doing their part, that's like such a big thing, sailing a ship across the ocean to go and save people, it's kind of crazy.
It is, right, and I think it is unfortunate that it takes it almost like it almost brings up that as I said before, that primal backed into a corner feeling. Like when an animal is backed into a corner, no matter how small it is or defenseless that you think it is, it will fight for its existence, right? And in this situation, they were literally backed into a corner. Like, it was either you swim the channel, which you can't do, in full military gear and exhausted after months of fighting, or you die and you fight. And they were fighting, they didn't just sit around and do nothing, and they hoped for rescue, and it came, it came, thankfully. But we see it in the world right now that a lot of the time, unfortunately, especially in politics at the moment, it feels a lot like every nation that is under attack or its existence is threatened acts like that primal feeling of being backed into a corner. It either has to fight or die, and that's why we see scenarios where we see such escalation in situations like it's a little more political than literal, but like, for instance, China was slapped with a 108% tariff on all imports to the United States.
I think it just went up, didn't it?
No. Well, I actually don't know. It might have. I know that there is a 90-day pause on most nations on the list, Australia included, which means the Australia dollar is going back up because it was crashing for a few days. The stock market crashed, by the way. Just thought I'd slap that in at the end of the podcast.
Yep, so guys, everyone, bye,
baby. Don't do that. Fuck the economy. Let it crash, let it suffer. Trust me, if you're under the age of 30, it helps. So what did China do as a backslap? Put 80% tariffs on all imports from the United States, so it instantly fucks them, and reaches out to Australia personally with their private ambassadors and says that Australia and China need to draw closer to each other because the Pacific requires the cooperation of its major players, right? Now, what China are saying in that moment is that the United States is no longer a major player and that Australia and China should draw closer to each other. Now, I think there is obviously a lot of arguments to say that China is not a good government or a state. However, I think it's very interesting that there is the possibility that they will eventually become our closest ally, because we don't have a choice. We're a European country in the Pacific when you boil down what Australia is, and that makes it extremely difficult to have ties to the West, and by West I mean Europe, not the United States. And when the United States does shit like this, it backs you into a corner, and we'll just have to see how these countries react. China instantly slaps back with like another, the America's shot it in the fucking in the chest, and then China's slapped it in the cock. It's like, it's such a weird back and forth right now politically. But we see it sounds stupid, but it's a political form instead of a literal form. But we see it in that when a nation or peoples are backed into a corner, they will do what they need to do to fight back. And that's why I think things like the escalation of this scenario is not good. I don't know. It's all a bit of a mess. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about Dunkirk and how that slightly applies to what we see today. Also, a very warming story that a nation came together to save its boys,
It is
pretty
sweet
much.
because I always hear about how French people and English people don't like each other, and then to hear about that, it's kind of cute.
Well,
Um,
the dislike comes from like pretty much 1,000 years ago now.
yeah, now it's just a bit of banter.
Well, yeah, now it's just a bit of a French, British, but realistically, we've been friends for a little bit, and we are still friends now, but back in the
So I
day,
guess
God, we fucking hated each other.
very quickly is the whole reason that they were just like basically stuck on like at Dunkirk and Calais was it literally just because they were like, hey, we need you guys to go over to France and help them, and then by the time they got there they were just
So
like
the
stuck.
British Expeditionary Force was actually deployed to Belgium and sections of northern France. But because the Germans... So on that map I sent you, it's actually not the worst. Do you see the Belgian border at the bottom there? Do you see that lake, that river that kind of cuts it in half?
Yeah.
So where that river meets France, you can see that little like nipple that comes in, that little... Did you know nowadays there's actually a nuclear factory in there? How funny is that? There's a nuclear power plant in that section of France that literally eats into Belgium. They've put a nuclear power plant right there. So funny. So the British were deployed to Belgium along that river pretty much, and the Germans swept under that river and up, which means that the English couldn't go down and they couldn't go east because the Germans were also invading Antwerp and Brussels. So they pretty much swept in from the right and under and just cupped the British army in the north.
Yeah, okay.
So the British army didn't have the chance to deploy to the south. They were sent there to defend the kind of northern border of France and in Belgium. And because it happened so fast, they literally just got cupped in the north. And that's how it happened. But yeah, it was a dangerous period of time for the Allies. And if we hadn't... I say we, like I was there. If the British... I remember
was on one of the boats.
I was there, like, fucking...
John was at the Toyota dealership in Dunkirk.
I was there, guys, I was there. If the British hadn't sent an army to France, it would have been seen very poorly by the globe. Would we have saved 70,000 lives? Yes. Would those 70,000 people probably have died somewhere else? Also, yes. I think it also meant that... Now, this is awful, and this is me being cynical. The British would not have sent evacuation forces at the level they did if it was French forces stuck in Dunkirk.
Oh, yeah.
They probably would have tried to evacuate some of them on destroyers, but they would not have sent the 800 civilian vessels. And so the 170,000 roughly Frenchmen that were rescued on Dunkirk along with the British, I think it's all of the circumstances that led to this, it's so abnormal. Because if the Germans hadn't stopped the push, the British would have died. If the clouds hadn't been there, the British would have died. If the French in Lille had surrendered, the British would have died. It's like if the civilian boats hadn't been sent, the British would have died. It's all these circumstances came together to work, right? And it's such it's a great example of dynamic warfare, and that all these decisions and all these things were changing, and it either comes out really good for one side and really bad for the other, or vice versa, right? Like, we look at, for instance, Russia in winter. If winter hadn't happened, Russia would have lost. But because winter came, and the Germans had not rolled out winter clothing, the Germans lost their momentum and so lost the war. If the clouds had not been there for those 6 of those 8 days, the British army would have died in France, and the British would have surrendered. It's such a strange... It's almost like the universe was against the Nazis, eh? Isn't that strange, huh? They let them have a couple of wins, but in the end, good prevails. And I think really what it comes down to is just spirit. The Russians lasted till winter because of their spirit. The British were able to rescue their soldiers because of spirit. It's really... It comes down to the spirit of a nation and what it's willing to do to save its people, to exist, to survive. And I think it's a really important takeaway that if you don't give a shit about history, what are you doing here? And you should also always compare it to now. There's always a circumstance now where a historical thing that you read ever will compare to something that's going on now, because that's just how, very strangely, our world works, is that we go around in circles over and over and over again.
Ouroboros.
What?
Ouroboros. You know, the
What does that
snake
mean?
eating itself?
Oh, I do know what that is. I didn't know what its name was, though.
Ouroboros.
How does it keep getting longer?
Huh?
Like, if it's eating itself, surely at some point it just curls itself in, right?
I think he's kind of just chasing his tail like a dog. But he's just got like a little bit of his tail in his mouth.
Oh, but couldn't it, like, because it's a snake and not a dog, couldn't it just, like, constrict itself in and eat more of itself?
Yeah, and then it's like Pac-Man when you die in Pac-Man and he just disappears.
Alright.
Ouroboros.
That's
what we'll talk about next episode.
Is
we'll
that
talk about
alright?
Ouroboros.
Sure, that's on you, man. I don't know what that means. Alright, guys.
Well, look, that snake eating itself.
It was more than a pleasure having you all here with us, and
this was a great episode.
Me and Jack love you very much, and I'm glad you think it was a good episode. I hope that my little sad ramblings at the end there, to compare it to real life, didn't impact you guys too much, and you were able to take away from this story that when it comes to what's called the indomitable human spirit, it exists, and it always has been, and it always will be. Thank you so much for joining us. Jack,
where can I find you?
Well, damn it, I was just about to tell you. You can find me on at John Real Talk on X, on Twitter, on that app that is hellish. If you want to tweet me and say, John, you're wrong. John, I hate you. John, the French surrendered really quickly and they're shit. You can do what you want, man. Just tweet me there. If you have any further questions, quandaries, or topics that you want me to talk about, you can also hit us up there. Jack, where can they find you?
Oh, you can find me everywhere. I am an aspiring content creator and self-proclaimed comedian, so you can find me on YouTube, on Twitch, on X, the Everything app. You can find on all of it, to be honest. It's just Ayo Jack. That's with 2 A's. AAYOJACK. These little links are all in the description anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
That is
Nothing
so hype.
matters.
Well, you know what comes next, Jack? That's right. Mwah!
Oh, of course. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for it.
Oh,
do it again.
Okay. Mwah!
Nice.
I presume his lips were puckered, and also he had his mouth there. All right, I love you guys. Let me see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.